everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Katie, and today I'm doing my May reading wrap-up. So this month for May, I did not read as much as I usually do, as I was just kind of relaxing. I was getting a little bit more writing done as well at the end of this month, but I did still get quite a few read, as well as a lot of them ended up being like really fantastic reads. So read less, but I think my overall rating was a little bit higher. So I will put all of my my reading stats and everything at the end of the video, so if you're interested, make sure to stay tuned for that. So I did read 18 books this month, which seems like a lot, but the past couple months I've been reading like 25 plus, which that was also rare for me. Now we're getting back to like my regularly scheduled programming of last year and the year before, where like I read roughly about between 15 to 18. So 18 is pretty average for me now, but I just had a fantastic reading month. So I did have 3 books that I DNF'd, which means it did not finish and I just quit them. So let's talk about those first so I don't forget. So the first one I will say is probably a soft DNF. It is Crust No One by Winnie Archer. This is the second book in a cozy mystery series called A Bread Shop Mystery. I don't know. I would think I got to like 20% in and I was just bored. I was bored. I didn't really care what happened in the mystery. I wasn't even paying half attention, if I'm being honest, in the audiobook. I was like, it was just very, very slow. I wasn't invested in any of the characters. It felt like, honestly, like it was an entirely different character from like the first book. So I was like, I really didn't care. And I probably will not continue the series. I was okay reading the first one, but it really wasn't that great. So I probably will just skip finishing the rest of the series. And it's okay to do that if you're not enjoying a series. And then the next one is called The Town the World Forgot by Boris Basic. I don't know how to pronounce that. This was a Kindle Unlimited book, and I was really excited to find this one because the idea was there. I love the idea, but there was a lot of, well, not a lot, but there was quite a bit of swearing, and they did take the Lord's name in vain, I think like at least 2 or 3 times in like one chapter. So I was like, you know what, I'm done. So I put it down, but the premise sounded really good. It's about this town that, I guess, during a winter storm, if you're not safe and locked up in your house, there's, I guess, I don't know if it's this creature or something that comes and changes anybody who's outside into a snowman or snow creature, whatever, or ice sculpture. And so it sounded really good. I love the premise, but yeah, I just had way too much language in it for my taste, and I was like, nope, I'm just gonna put it aside and be done with it. And then the last one was probably the world's biggest disappointment in the history of my reading. And I'll tell you why. So there is an author that I absolutely love. I don't know if you've ever read her books. She's written quite a few clean historical romances, and she is Deanne Gist, and she has written a ton of books. Like, I'm talking at least 15 to 20, if I'm not mistaken. And I thought she stopped writing. Her last book came out probably about 8 to 10 years ago, I think. And come to find out, I got an email from her. It was from her subscription service, and she also stated it on her Facebook group that she has been writing for the past 5 or 6 years, but it's just been under a pen name. So I got excited. I was like, okay, I'm gonna look it up. They were on Kindle Unlimited. I was like, this is great. But she does state that these are more spicy. I'm like, are you kidding me? I was like, I loved your books, and I thought I knew her, not personally. I never really got to know her or anything, but I was like, why would you change your writing style so much? So I decided to give it a chance, and I ended up quitting about halfway through, I think, just because like the actual 2 main characters weren't extremely spicy level, but it was getting there. I did skim the rest to see if there was any open door scenes for you guys, and there was not, but it just, the kissing scenes were extremely spicy. Plus, like, there was like one part where the main guy character was like reading a romance novel out loud to the girl, and like that was a pretty spicy scene in the book that he was reading, and I was like, no, definitely not. And so that was a huge disappointment, and that's what makes me sad. Is like when you know an author's writing and they start doing that, it's like, you know, like I used to love them, so I gave that book a chance, and I'm like, never again will I probably ever read a book from her, you know. And now she does decide that that was the wrong move, you know, and she does decide to write and go back to clean romances, I probably will pick her back up. But yeah, that was a very big disappointment. So if you're wanting to know the title and the author, that way, if you want to read it or if you want to skip it like I did, it's called My Daring Texan by Dakota LaCoy. I don't know why she picked that name. But anyways, so yes, that was probably my biggest disappointment of ever reading anything. So yes, and my mom used to love her books too. All right, and she probably will not be picking that up. So those were my DNFs for the month. Now we can go into happier thoughts and talk about the books I did finish. I don't have a lot of these books physically, as a lot of them were on Kindle Unlimited. I had like 7 Kindle Unlimited books that I read. So we're just going to go through and just have a good time talking about the books we read. So I did read 11 mainstream fiction and then 7 Christian fiction. So I usually do mainstream and then I'll do Christian fiction at the end. So I read 4 classics this month. The first one was Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. This was a 1-star for me. I'm sorry, I don't think she's an author for me. I just found it so slow and so dry. It's about this woman, I guess, who's in society, and I guess like an old flame from her past comes back into her life. But I was just so bored, like through the entire thing. I was like, I think I'm done now. Like, can we please stop listening to the audiobook? Because I was very bored through it all. I just did not have a great time with that one. Then the next one was Gentlemen Prefer Blondes by Anita Lowe's. I think that's her name. I can't see it in my, I think that is. It could be Anita Lee's. I can't read my own graphics. Anyways, but Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. It's also a movie as well, starring Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell. This is one of the instances where I really prefer the movie over the book. I was not a huge fan of the book. I gave it 2.5 stars. It was okay. I like kind of the girls who were trying to commit cons and they were kind of con artists a little bit. I like that part, but the rest of it I was just like, main character was dating a married man. I was like, I really wasn't a fan of that. And the story just really didn't grab my attention all that much. So yes, it wasn't a favorite of mine. The Hound of the Baskervilles, a Sherlock Holmes mystery by Arthur Conan Doyle. And I gave this one 3 stars. It was okay. I definitely felt like it was very reminiscent of like the Basil Rathbone movie TV adaptation. So I really did enjoy kind of like having a good time with my first actual like read of Sherlock Holmes. It was actually pretty easy to understand, which was good. I was kind of hesitant going in because there might be old English or whatever, but I actually didn't have a problem with this one. I actually did enjoy the mystery, but I think about halfway through it, I kind of lost interest and the story kind of wasn't as intriguing as I thought it was going to be. But I am excited to try more of the stories. Then the next one I read, I also gave 3 stars, was Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. And this one was okay. It was kind of half love story, half historical fiction. We're following a woman who I guess is, I wouldn't say tasked, but like her grandmother wants her to get married before she passes away. And because she wants her to be taken care of. So she tells her granddaughter she's going to marry somebody who's like, I think 10 or 12 years older than her. So she does. And the relationship kind of starts off a little bit of like a friendship, but then it just kind of goes downhill. Like they really don't care about their romance anymore. And I think he ends up passing away and she ends up getting into a romance with a younger man now who I think is like 10 years younger than her almost. And they become friends to more and they get married and kind of he's got a little bit of addictions going on, and then it just goes downhill from there as well with has to do a lot with mental health in that book as well. And so it was an interesting read, but I think like the first half of the book I really was kind of bored with it, but it did pick up a little bit after. Next book I have is Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuval. I give this one 3.5 stars. I liked the premise. There was one small love scene in it, but it was very, very quick, thankfully. So I was able to kind of skip over that and continue. But I don't know. It was an interesting premise, as I said, and I did try to read the sequel, and the sequel had like so much swearing like right in the beginning, I was like, I don't remember having this in the first book. Like there was maybe 1 or 2 swear words in the whole book. So I did not continue with the actual series, but I like the premise of it. It's about this girl, I guess, like she falls in a hole in the earth and she finds like this giant like mechanical hand. It almost kind of reminded me of the movie Iron Giant. Like it kind of had that premise to it. And so they're trying to figure out where all the pieces of this giant are, like around the world. They're like sneaking into countries and trying to build this giant. And so they're trying to figure out how it works and stuff. Is it alien and stuff? So I like that aspect of it. But I really wasn't a fan of the characters. I just wish there was more depth to the actual characters themselves. As far as like the actual, like the premise was fantastic. I wish it was just a better characters, I guess. Then I went down a rabbit hole of reading mafia slash spy romance novels, and they're all clean. So, but I don't know. I was just like, are there any clean mafia romances? I just wanted like a mindless read. So I was just typing into my phone and being like, clean mafia romances, and actually did find some, surprisingly. I have a few more on my list that I'm going to read in the next couple of months. But the first one I have on here, I gave 3.5 stars to, which it wasn't the first one I read as far as mafia romance. The next one is, but this one was a lower rating. This one's called Desperate Vows by Kes Avalon, and I will say this one had a little bit, the kissing scenes were a little bit more heavy as far as spiciness goes, but it never went past kissing, so I was very happy with that. And there might have been 1 or 2 swear words, but overall it was a pretty clean romance for me, so I was very happy with that. I'm going to try the next book in this series, but in this one we're following a woman who she has a very, very bad relationship with her father, and her father, I believe, is like from a rival mafia family. Well, she decides that she knows that her father wants her to marry somebody, have an arranged marriage, and she's like, I want none of that. Like, I do not want to marry who my father's going to pick. She thinks it's going to be like this older guy, and so she decides to go to a rival mafia family and task the boss of that, who's like the oldest brother or something, to marry her. And he's like what? Like, I don't understand. But he decides to kind of like figure out what's going on, and I guess that her father actually wants him to be her husband. But there's like some kind of like mystery and intrigue going on. Like, why does he want the daughter to be married off right away? There's money involved in that, and I had a good time. I thought it was a fun story. I'm not sure why I only gave it 3.5 stars, but could have been closer to 4 stars. But I did enjoy the actual storyline, and the romance. The romance was very sweet in it. Aside from like the 1 or 2 heavy kissing scenes, other than that, it was actually a really nice romance. Then the next one, I gave 5 stars. It could be closer to 6 stars because I really, really enjoyed it. And I talked about this book, I think, on my Instagram and on Goodreads, that it was a 600 plus page romance novel. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to enjoy romance that's 600 pages. Like, I can barely read a 350 page book. Like, if you look at my shelves, majority of my books are 350 pages or less. So I was like, 600 pages, that is insane. But I was like, I loved the cover, and I was for it. So this one was called Dark Love by Aurora Noir, and I loved it. So this one's about this girl. She just started working for this office, and she's very, very shy. She's kind of, I think she has a little bit of anxiety and stuff. So she kind of is trying to make friends. So she decides to go with the girls at the office to go get drinks. And she thinks they're just going to go to the bar. She doesn't drink, so she's like, well, I'll just get a soda or whatever. So she goes, and it ends up being a club. And so she goes in there, and something happens where she's hit on by somebody. And so she decides, like, okay, I'm going to find, like, the biggest, baddest looking guy in the room to help me out and get out of this situation. So she ends up meeting somebody who ends up being the owner of the club. She doesn't know that. But he's, like, the big kind of bruiser type of guy. And so she pretends, like, to be his girlfriend, not knowing that he's kind of, like, in with mafia ties and stuff like that. And so something happens, though, later on where she comes back and she ends up getting drugged at the club, and he saves her. And it's a very, very sweet romance. There is actually no kissing scenes in that book until like 3/4 of the way through the book. So, and there was like, honestly, I don't think the kissing scenes were they're just, sweet kissing scenes. I will say, though, that they did sleep together, but more of like he just wanted to make sure she was safe, and she was struggling to be by herself. So nothing happened at all in the book. So I was happy with that. I wasn't sure. I was like, okay, they're sleeping, like, you know, he was on top of the sheets or whatever. I'm like, okay, if it's gonna get anywhere, you know, I was careful, and it didn't. It did not at all. So I was very happy with that. But I did enjoy like kind of like his he was a little more overprotective than most guys would be in that situation. I was like, he's very overprotective, like quite a bit. But I can also kind of see the relationship between the two characters. It turned out well for both of them, I think. But yeah, so I did actually end up really enjoying all 600 pages of that book. That was a long book, but I did enjoy it. Next, I finished a duology, which I think that's all it is. A duology plus 2 like short stories that are like the epilogues for the book. So I read Date with Danger and Taken with Trouble by Janessa Faith. I gave book 1 5 stars and book 2 6 stars. These were fantastic. And I also read, one's called Engaged with Espionage and Married to Mischief. And those are like the extra epilogues. I want to talk about those because you don't want to know what happens or whatever. But definitely Date with Danger, following a girl who ends up going on a blind date with somebody that she met on the internet. Well, she ends up mistaking an FBI agent as her date. And he's like, how do I get rid of this woman? Well, they end up kind of like bumping into each other as he's on this mission to try to find this art thief. And it was just such a fantastic story. I loved it. The humor was so much fun. Definitely a rom-com. It was a great time. I loved it. And we're following kind of like, I would say kind of like, she's very much like a Nancy Drew type character where she's like, she wants to be all involved in the trouble, and he's an FBI agent. He's like, listen, you can't be involved in this. And she's like, no, I still want to have fun and do this. So it was such a great time. Loved it, as well as the sequel, which is actually about the art thief and the FBI agent who's tasked to get him in. And their relationship was an enemies to more, and just the enemies to more was done so fantastic, and it was funny and hilarious, and it was just, there's some scenes in there that like I absolutely loved in that book. It was a great time. So both of those books, if you love spy and espionage stories, those are great. I will say the kissing scenes were a little bit on the heavier side, but nothing past kissing. So, but I did love those stories. They were fun. All right, now we can go into the Christian fiction books that I read. I finally finished a series that I have been like in the middle of for like 2 years now, but I finally finished the last book. It's called Something Borrowed Collection. It's all by different authors. And so I read A Promise So Sweet by Andrea Boyd, which is the final book, and I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. It was just a light, I think it was a Christmas book, if I'm not mistaken. It could have been. But it was just kind of like a light romance, and I was like, listen, I just want a light romance to just get out of the way. I honestly can't remember what it was about at all. It's very rare that happens anymore, but yes, I don't really remember what happened in that book. So yeah, it was a 3 stars. It was enjoyable while I was reading it, but I don't remember anything about it, unfortunately. Next, I read a fantasy book called Oathbound by Victoria McCombs, and I gave this one 3 stars. I think I overhyped it in my brain, because when I heard pirates, and like this has been on my TBR ever since it was published like 4 years ago, and I'm like, oh, I could finally sit down and listen to the audiobook, and I think I was underwhelmed because I just had it hyped up in my head. I thought it was going to be great, and I was like, this is going to be a fantastic book, and it was good, but I don't know, I thought it was going to be better, honestly. It was still enjoyable, but not as much as what I thought. So in this sort of following, I think it's a brother and a sister, and the brother is a pirate, and so I guess supposedly their mother was a pirate, and the sister wanted nothing to do with it. Well, the sister actually has a disease that is pretty much incurable, so she decides to go on like a last adventure with her brother to try to find a cure for her disease. And it's pretty interesting. It was a good time. There was lots of like, there was mermaids and, you know, bad pirates, because they were, you know, a little bit of good pirating, I guess. Not necessarily good pirating, but you know what I mean. Like there was bad and worse, I guess, as far as pirates go. But there was like a blood oath, I guess, that one of the main characters got involved in, where she was kind of chained to somebody else. And yeah, so there's a lot going on, and I don't know, it was a little bit more slower than what I thought it was going to be. The Voice We Find by Nicole Deese. So this is the final book in her Fog Harbor romance series, and I gave this one 4 stars, or 3.5 technically. But it was pretty good. I did enjoy the storyline. We're following audiobook narrators, and I did a whole review on this one as well, actually, on my channel. But we're following audiobook narrators, and Sophie is has a failed Broadway career, and so she decides to work at her family's winery and also get a job as an audiobook narrator, which I thought was pretty interesting. So we're following her and the guy who's also a narrator, and kind of their friendship to more, and seeing him and his relationship with his sister and stuff. And I liked it, but I will say I did notice when somebody mentioned that it was like in a Facebook group or something, they were talking about books, and somebody was talking about how like, oh no, it was like Hallmark movies. Like Hallmark movies that like there's like a huge romance, and then like all of a sudden they'll like throw a wrench in the mix and create conflict, and then they get like a happy ever after, and it's like, well, why does there need to be a conflict? Like, can't we just work it out? And I feel like there was a conflict in this book, and I don't think it really needed to be there necessarily, but I did enjoy the storyline, and I did like the characters. But yeah, I don't know, sometimes conflict isn't really needed in a book, if you know what I mean. So yeah. All right, then the next one is Tilly by Frank Peretti, which is a short novella, which was a radio drama on Focus on the Family at first. And I really enjoyed this one. I gave this one 4 stars. It's about this couple who goes to a funeral just for some man in town. Well, they end up seeing a lady far off in the distance at this gravesite. So they decide to go over and talk to her, and the lady runs away. Well, on the gravestone is only a name and a birth date, no end date. And the name on it was Tilly. And so his wife is like very upset. He has no idea why. So he decides to try to solve the mystery of who this Tilly was on the gravestone. And she ends up having a pretty vivid dream from the Lord. And it was just such a great book. It has to do a lot with past mistakes, and trying to figure out, like figuring out that, you're forgiven for what happened in your past, and I really love the story. It was very, very good. Then I have the Indigo Aerys by Laura France. This is her newest release this year, and I really enjoyed this one. I gave this one 4.5 stars, and this one we're following Juliet and her sister, and they're living at a river plantation in Virginia, and something happens where there's a Buchanan clan from Scotland that comes in order to, I guess, become united with the Indigo Aeryses. And so he comes wanting to marry one of the sisters. Well, the older sister's like, well, it's got to be my younger sister. Like, I have no interest in marrying. But come to find out that he wants the older sister, and she kind of really doesn't want anything to do with it. But then there is, unfortunately, a scandal that happens where she has to flee Virginia. And so she decides to go with the man from Scotland. And I just really enjoyed it. Loved the historical. It was a very light romance, and it was getting, honestly, more getting to know each other. And there's definitely like prearranged marriage / marriage of convenience. So I really did enjoy this one. I also have a review of that one on my channel as well. Then the last one I have, as far physically, I have one more after this. This is A Royal Christmas Wedding by Rachel Hauck. I'm losing my voice too, by the way. So that's why I'm getting a little quieter. But this is the final book, which is a little novella after the Royal Wedding series. And so, yes, it is a Christmas novel. But I will say it read more like you can read it anytime, really. So this one's about a college volleyball star named Avery and Prince Colin of Brighton Kingdom. And something happens where they were in a relationship in college. I believe they were in college. But he was pushed away from her 5 years ago. And so they never even, never message each other or anything. This is like a second chance romance, but I feel like it was done really well. So something happens where Colin's like now the most eligible bachelor. But something's stopping him from kind of marrying anybody there. And so there's also like a century-old tradition in his country where we're like a royal used to ring the bells of the tower, and that's how he would show his love. Well, something happens where those bells ring, and he's like, I did not do that. So I love the story. It was so sweet. Definitely, I will be rereading this. I thought it was so sweet. I gave it 5 stars. Really loved it. Then the last book I read was the 3rd book in the Holly series by C.C. Warrens. It was called Crosstoff. And she said that it was her most intense book. I still think book one, honestly, was the most intense as far as like action and stuff goes. I feel like book one, honestly, but this one definitely deals with a lot of heavy topics. The whole series does. So I would say, you know, read the trigger warnings for this series. It definitely deals with very heavy topics, but I loved it. The found family between her and her best friend and the two guys in the police force, they were just a fantastic family group. And I love them, especially Mark's. Like, he's one of the police detectives, and like, I love him so much, and I just can't wait to get more of his story. I love him. So yes, I loved it, and I can't really tell you too much about it, but if you love action with very, very, very minimal romance in it, with humor and found family trope, it's a great read. But as I said, look up the trigger warnings, because there are some in there. All right, so those are all the books that I read this month. Now I'm going to go ahead and talk about the stats that I had for May. So here are the kind of stats for the end of the month. I read 18 books, and for formats, I read 1 physical, 7 ebooks, and 10 audiobooks. So kind of a half split between ebooks and audiobooks this month. For ratings, I have 3 DNFs, 1 1-star, 1 2.5 star, 4 3 stars, 3 3.5 stars, 3 4 stars, 1 4.5 star, 4 5 stars, and 1 6 star. So not as many 6 stars, but 6 star was definitely worth it. Then for genres, I read 4 classics. Who was this girl? Then 1 sci-fi, 1 historical romance, 6 contemporary romances, 4 romantic suspense / mysteries, 1 contemporary, and 1 fantasy. I read 5 from my library apps, 7 from Kindle Unlimited. That was a really high number this year. I was so proud of that number. 3 were review books, and 3 were from my own bookshelves. So it was really great, and I had a great time with the books that I read. So let me know what you read this month. Let me know if you have any book recommendations for me. I'd love to see what you have, and I'd love to chat in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.